This is part two of the public radio record find that I went to in the end of June. We're going to finish with some 12-inch that I found there and move on to the 10-inch records and ones that I bought at record stores in San Francisco, and then some surprises at the end that I found at the record swap meet. I finally found a stereo copy of West Side Story to replace a mono copy that I had. I had this record on CD and I was not happy with the remastering. I didn't care for the sound quality. It seemed to be rather shrill on the high end, and I decided I wanted to go back to the original LP mastering of it, so I finally picked up a stereo copy of it. Next is an album I had as a teenager. I've since bought the original copy of Around the World in 80 Days on Decca. I bought this one because I'm kind of curious the type of music I was listening to in the early 60s, and I remember this album fondly. It had a lot of plays at our house, so I finally got a copy of it in mint condition. Most of these I find are needle worn and very scratched up, so again, I was lucky to find a good mint copy of this. Next is the Broadway musical Oliver, which was produced on the English stage. This one has one of my favorite female singers from England, Alma Cogan. She started her career in the mid-50s, and unfortunately it was cut short in the around 1963. Unfortunately, she passed away from cancer. She was also a protege of the Beatles. Next is a stereo recording of Carousel. RCA brought this out right about the time the movie came out, and was probably meant to kind of, I don't know if you would call it compete, but kind of also be a album people might want to buy rather than the soundtrack album. And next is a stereo demonstration record called Vitaphonic Stereo, Extrasensory Perception and Sound. And this has a lot of various artists on it, and it's the first time I've ever seen this, and was lucky enough to get it in stereo. Also at the record sale, I found stacks of 10-inch LPs. I collect these. Kind of it's a sampling of what was in the early LP era. This one is another one of my all-time favorite singers, Eartha Kitt, and includes the song that she was famous for, C'est Bon. Next is McKinney's Cotton Pickers Volume 1. This would be mostly recordings, and again, RCA is not very good about, yes they are. On this one particularly, they were very good at giving a discography. These recordings date from 1928. Next is Red Nichols Classics, Volume 1, Red Nichols and His 5 Pennies. These recordings were originally issued on Brunswick 78s in the late 20s and early 30s. I also found Volume 3. I've already had Volume 2 on a 10-inch, and also have it on a 7-inch EP, so I was lucky to find these, and they were in, I would say, VG++ to near mint condition, which is, excuse me, which is very unusual to find 10-inch recordings in this condition. Next, there is no sleeve on this, but it's Great Scott by Hazel Scott with rhythm accompaniment. Hazel Scott was a black pianist in the late 1940s. She was in the era when it was very hard for black female pianists to break into the jazz medium. So her and I'm trying to think of the other person. I'm having a memory senior moment here. Also, as Mary Lou Williams. She was the other one that produced a lot of records in the late 30s and early 40s, and she was lucky to get into the jazz medium. Next is a recording by Ray Anthony called I Remember Glenn Miller. Ray Anthony was part of Glenn Miller's orchestra early in his career. Next is Artie Shaw's favorites. These are recordings that date from 38, 39. Include Indian Love Call, Rosalie, The Karaoke, What Is This Thing Called Love? Next is Ethel Merman's Call Me Madam. I just had to have this on 10-inch. I have the 7-inch EP, and I don't see this usually too often on the 10-inch LP labels. The same cover was also used for the 78 album. Don't Fence Me In. These were country western songs by Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby Volume 2. These would be songs that were sung in his movie, Two for Tonight, and The Picture Anything Goes. These were later reissued under Bing's Hollywood, which was a 15-volume set that came out in the early 60s. I also have that set, and thought it'd be nice to also have the earlier set that was on 10-inch. Another Artie Shaw record, which includes a lot of his performances from the early 40s and a few recordings from 1945. Gems of Jazz Volume 3. These would be, again, Brunswick recordings featuring Benny Goodman, Coleman Hawkins, Fletcher Henderson, Henry Red Allen on trumpet, Joe Venuti. Let's see who else here that people might remember. John Kirby, and I also have Volume 4. Unfortunately, they did not have Volumes 1 and 2. And last is the Dorsey Brothers Orchestra, 1934 to 1935. And these are going to be used record store finds that I bought in San Francisco. The first two happen to be eBay. I'm an avid ragtime piano fan, and I happen to love Winifred Atwell. She is originally from the Caribbean and made her home in England. So I have Magic Fingers Volume 1, and also Double Sevens, which are all rags and boogie woogie. Next is Tribute to Tommy Dorsey Volume 1. I essentially bought this one to replace some horrible RCA Camden albums that were put out in the early 60s in fake stereo. So again, I went back to a very early pressing. This one's 1957, that was done before the stereo era. Patty Austin, whose album is titled The Real Me, I guess she, from what I understand from reading the book on Dinah Washington, Dinah Washington's family knew her family and kind of inspired her in her singing style. And the bands played on. This is a various artists album that dates from the early 70s on British Decca. Most of the recordings here date from 33 all the way up to about 1938. Various English bands, including very early Mantovani, Ronaldo's Accordions, so I see some other, Sam Brown and his vocals, also Ambrose and his orchestra. I'm also a fan of anything that it comes out of Britain in the way of music from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Next is a record find I had from Wax Trax Records in Denver. I've never seen this album before, let alone in stereo. It's Teresa Brewer's Aloha from Teresa. All the song titles on here are Hawaiian. Another album I've been looking for is the Patsy Cline Story. Love Me or Leave Me by Doris Day. This has been a hard album to find in the Bay Area, and I had to go to find a copy of this in Denver, Colorado, which is where we were at a couple weeks ago. Then for all you Connie fans, I found the exciting Connie Francis. And Connie Francis's I'm Me Again, which looks like this album from the copyright date was 1981. It includes some of her older recordings and also some of those that were done in the early 80s. Next, I also found a whole bunch of what looked like LPs but are not, and they're laser discs, and these again were at the public radio record sale. So I found a good copy of It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World. This one is going to be replacing a DVD copy that I have that was done around 2003, 2004. The DVD had a lot of scenes deleted, and this is complete with all of the scenes as the movie was originally shown. Next, they had a whole bunch of Alfred Hitchcock Laserdiscs. This one is The Man Who Knew Too Much, the original one. Alfred Hitchcock Sabotage. Alfred Hitchcock's Secret Agent. Alfred Hitchcock's Blackmail. Neil Simon's Murder by Death, including all of the original theatrical trailers and all of the endings that were sometimes cut from those shown on TV. They had two types of endings. One was in the theater, and the other they cut it out for the TV run of this. And last, a movie I've been looking for years, The Pink Panther. That's it. Sorry for these too long videos, but there's a lot to show. I only go to the show once a year, but that's when I buy the bulk of my records. And I can't beat the value. They were, like I said, $1 a piece for the LPs and $2 for the Laserdisc. So this is it until probably next year.